Thank you for being here and spending a little time with this story. Before we begin, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment, or sharing this video with someone who enjoys meaningful science fiction. In this story, a human rescue pilot hears one buried signal from a forgotten colony, and that one choice may expose a truth the galaxy tried to erase. Now, let's step into the cold silence of Kestrel Ring. A human pilot reached the colony the galaxy tried to erase. Mason Reed had learned to distrust silence. On Earth, silence in the polar lanes usually meant trouble. It meant a storm had swallowed the radio towers, or a mountain pass had closed behind a convoy, or a power station had gone dark while families waited in houses that were losing heat. Silence was never empty. It was only a place where someone had stopped being heard. That was why Mason kept one ear on the old rescue band, even when his ship told him there was nothing there. The North Star Mercy moved through the outer edge of the Damara system with its running lights low and its cargo bay locked down. It was not a warship. It was not fast, pretty, or new. Its hull had the square shoulders of a craft built to carry generators, water tanks, shelter frames, and people who had run out of other options. Along its side, faded blue letters marked it as an Earth Civil Relief transport. Mason sat alone in the cockpit, one hand near the manual controls as ice dust struck the forward shield in pale streaks. Ahead of him, the Kestrel Ring curved around a dead mining lane, a wide belt of dark rock and frozen mineral shards. The company map called it inactive industrial property. The navigation computer called it a hazard zone. Mason called it the kind of place where a bad day could become a graveyard before anyone admitted there was a problem. His official job was simple. He was carrying air filter cores to a transit station near the inner lane. The assigned route avoided the old mining cluster and kept him clear of anything owned by the Helix Trade Combine. He had been told twice not to cut through Kestrel Ring. He had also been told that nobody lived there anymore. That was the part he did not like. Places did not empty themselves as cleanly as companies claimed. People left marks, heat scars, old beacon pings, waste signatures, scratched docking records, a tool left behind, a coat, a name painted above a door. Mason leaned closer to the audio panel when a thin line of static shivered under the normal belt noise. The computer softened it at once. It cleaned the channel, labeled it as industrial drift, and pushed it aside. Mason brought it back. For a few seconds, there was only hiss. Then a voice broke through, thin, young, and bent out of shape by distance. There are children here. Mason did not move for a full breath. He replayed the sound. The words came again, weaker this time. There are children here. It did not sound like a machine echo. It had fear in it, breath in it, and the uneven rhythm of someone trying not to cry. He opened the rescue directory. Nothing appeared. No active distress call. No medical alert. No shelter request. No registered colony inside Kestrel Ring. The map remained clean and dead. Mason switched to the public emergency band. This is Earth Civil Relief, Transport North Star Mercy. I am receiving a possible distress signal from Kestrel Ring. Any station in Damaris. Confirm civilian presence. The answer came from the transit station after a delay. A board controller spoke through a filtered line. North Star Mercy, Kestrel Ring is closed industrial property. No civilian settlement is registered there. Continue on your assigned route. I have a voice signal, Mason said. Young speaker. Possible life support failure. Industrial echoes are common in the outer belt. The Combine has marked the region unsafe. Do not enter. Mason looked at the belt ahead. A field of black stone and blue-white ice turned slowly in the dark. Did Helix confirm evacuation? He asked. The controller paused too long. North Star Mercy, continue on your assigned route. Mason shut the public channel and opened a narrow scan toward the source. The signal was not drifting. It was being pressed down under a layer of commercial encryption. That was not natural interference. Someone had not failed to hear it. Someone had buried it. A second voice broke through, older than the first and sharp with exhaustion. If you are Earth, do not tell Helix you heard us. Mason stared at the signal line. He had flown enough disaster lanes to know the shape of fear. People afraid of weather sounded one way. People afraid of their rescuers sounded different. He disengaged the autopilot from the assigned route. The North Star Mercy complained with a warning tone. Entering restricted commercial property would void insurance coverage, place the craft under legal review, and require authorization from Helix Trade Combine. Mason reached over and silenced the warning. "I hear you," he said into the buried channel. "This is Mason Reed, pilot of the North Star Mercy. I am turning toward your signal. Tell me how many are alive." The answer came after a burst of static. "We do not know anymore. Heat is failing by section. Children and injured are in Core 3. Outer homes are below survival range. Please do not bring Helix." "Who am I speaking to?" "Sela Vorn, thermal engineer for Kestrel Ring." Mason adjusted his approach angle as the belt thickened around him. "Sela, I need a landing point. There is no safe point." "Then give me the least dead one." For the first time, her voice lost a little of its edge. Not trust. Not yet. Only surprise. Dock 4 is bent but sealed on the inner side. If your hull is strong enough, you may hold it open. If it breaks, we lose that corridor. Understood. How long before Core 3 goes cold? Less than 4 hours. Less if Helix notices the signal changed. Mason looked through the forward glass. Kestrel Ring emerged from the dark in pieces. It was not a ring in the clean, graceful sense. It was a chain of old habitat modules bolted into ice-rich asteroids, linked by corridors and cargo spines. Some modules still held a faint blue glow. Others were black, their windows furred over from the inside. Broken solar wings hung like dead leaves. The closer he came, the clearer the lie became. This had not been an empty site. There were heat stains around family quarters. Small maintenance lights still blinked near sealed doors. Personal markings covered the inside edges of pressure windows. A colony had lived here long enough to make a harsh place into a home. The Helix warning came before he reached docking range. A calm voice filled his cockpit. "Unauthorized craft. You are entering protected commercial property under Helix Trade Combine control. Withdraw immediately to avoid liability." Mason kept flying. Another line appeared on the navigation display. The site registry did not list residents. It listed equipment, abandoned utilities, and something called labor residue. Mason's jaw tightened. On the hidden channel, Sela was calling names. "Tavin, keep the signal open. Mara, move the small ones away from the wall. Jory, seal the lower vent. Do not let them sleep. Keep them speaking." Names, Mason thought, not residue. He brought the North Star Mercy around a tumbling slab of ice and cut speed hard. Dock 4 was worse than Sela had said. One side had twisted outward. The other side was buried under frozen vapor. The alignment lights were dead. If he struck too hard, he would crack the corridor and kill the only passage into the colony. If he came in too soft, the ship would fail to lock, and the people inside would lose their last possible door. He had landed on half-buried roads in Arctic whiteouts. He had dropped power cells beside flooded hospitals while wind tried to roll his ship. He had set down on mountain ice where one wrong thrust would send a shelter pod into a ravine. This was worse. There was no ground. No hiraisen. Only dark, ice, metal, and the knowledge that people on the other side of that broken door were running out of heat. Mason breathed once, slow and even. "Sela, I need lights from your side. Anything I can see." A moment later, 3 weak lights flashed near the docking frame. One of them died at once. 2 remained. "I see them," Mason said. "Tell your people to move back from the corridor." "They are back." "Farther." Sela repeated the order in her own language, then in rough trade English. Mason waited until the corridor scan cleared. He rolled the North Star Mercy sideways, brought the old transport down as if it had weight, and fired the lower thrusters in short bursts. The ship trembled. The right side scraped ice. A metal groan carried through the hull. The docking frame caught. For one terrible second, it slipped. Mason hit reverse thrust and locked the manual clamps. The North Star Mercy slammed against Dock 4 hard enough to rattle every loose tool behind him. Red lights came alive across the console. One stabilizer was damaged. Outer hull pressure dipped, then held. The seal was ugly, crooked, and barely alive. But it was a seal. That meant heat could pass. People could pass. For the first time that cycle, Kestrel Ring had a door that did not belong to Helix. Dock connected. Mason said, "I'm coming in with heat packs and pressure masks." Sela did not answer right away. When she did, her voice was lower. "You should know what this means. Helix will not call this rescue. They will call it theft." Mason unstrapped and pulled on his cold suit. "I've been called worse for less." He entered the docking tunnel, carrying 2 emergency kits and a cable spool. The first breath inside Kestrel Ring cut through his mask filters with the metallic smell of cold systems, old smoke, and fear held too long in tight air. Sela Vorn waited near the inner hatch. She was taller than Mason by a few inches, thin from hunger, with gray-silver skin that had faded toward white around her hands. Pale blue lines ran under her skin like dim rivers. Her eyes were large and amber, bright with fever and calculation. Frost clung to the collar of her patched work coat. One long hand rested on a manual lever, as if she might still seal him out if he moved wrong. "Mason Reed," he said. "Earth Civil Relief." "Sela Vorn," she answered. "Thermal engineer. Acting keeper of what is left." He nodded toward the corridor behind her. "How many children?" She studied his face, searching for the trick. 42 in Core 3, she said. 17 in the outer homes if they are still alive. She paused, and the pause hurt more than the number. 12 badly injured from the old blast. Many elders. Many too cold to walk. Mason waited. "We had 306 before the heat cuts began," Sela said. "We have not counted the dead today." Mason set the kits down. "We count the living first. Then we carry them." "Show me." "Your heat spine." Sela blinked once. It was a small thing, but Mason saw it. Most people who had come here must have asked about or equipment, contracts, or data. He had asked where the living were. She turned and led him into the colony. Kestrel Ring was quieter than any shelter should have been. People whispered to save breath. Children sat in clusters under reflective blankets patched from insulation sheets. The Veyra were not human, but cold made suffering easy to understand. Their skin had lost its silver warmth. Their fingers moved slowly. Adults held children inside their coats, rubbing narrow shoulders and forcing them to sip melted water. An elderly Veyra woman stood beside a wall panel, her spine bent but her eyes clear. "This is Mara Quell," Sela said. "She helped build Core 3. Mara looked at Mason, then at the earth patch on his suit. "You came alone," she said. "First," Mason answered. "Not alone if I can help it." A young Veyra boy crouched near a gutted transmitter. His hands shook as he kept 2 exposed wires pressed together. "Tavin," Sela said, and the boy looked up too fast. "This is the pilot." Tavin stared at Mason with eyes too large for his thin face. "Did the signal reach Earth?" "It reached me," Mason said. "That is enough to start." The boy swallowed and kept holding the wires. Mason followed Sela to the thermal control room. It was not really a room anymore. It was a corner of Core 3 wrapped in cables, broken panels, and hand-drawn markings. Sela had been keeping the colony alive with bypass lines and stubbornness. Mason studied the system for less than a minute. "Your main heat feed is locked from outside." Helix said the lock was for safety, Sela said. "That lock is starving you." "Yes." He opened the cable spool and connected it to his ship link. "The North Star Mercy can feed you heat, but not everywhere. Not for long. We choose 3 zones first. Children, medical, and 1 corridor for evacuation. The outer homes will die. Not if we use the first heat window to move them inward." "How many can walk?" Sela looked at him with sudden sharpness. "You are not taking only the children. We start with those who will die. First, that may be children. It may be injured. It may be outer homes." He looked at the failing map, then back at her. "You know your people. I know my ship. We make one plan from both." Her face changed again. Not soft, not trusting, but less alone. They worked. Mason fed heat from the North Star Mercy into the colony in controlled pulses. Too much at once could crack pipes that had frozen from the inside. Too little would not save anyone. Sela moved through the system beside him, correcting maps, warning him about weak seals, and sending teams to open manual vents. Mason saw then that Kestrel Ring had not survived by accident. It had survived because Sela knew every pipe by sound, because Mara remembered old corridors not shown on company maps, and because Tavin and other older children carried messages where the comm panels had died. It had survived because exhausted adults still stood in lines and let the smallest go first. The first evacuation group reached the docking tunnel after 20 minutes. Children came wrapped in insulation cloth. Some walked. Some were carried. Some stared at Mason's suit as if Earth were not a planet, but a rumor that had finally grown hands. Mason guided them into the North Star Mercy's cargo bay, where he had unfolded warming frames and emergency bunks. The ship was not comfortable. It smelled of machine oil, fabric, and stored water. But it was warm. Tavin stood at the edge of the bay, shivering, and refused to enter. "You're on the first group," Sela said. "I have to keep the signal," Tavin said. "If I leave, Helix can bury it again." Sela's expression hardened with fear. "Tavin!" Mason crouched to the boy's level. "Can you read names clearly?" Tavin looked confused. "Yes." "Then I have a job for you. Every person who crosses into my ship, you say their name into this recorder. No codes. No work numbers. Names. Can you do that?" Tavin looked at the small recorder Mason placed in his hand. "Why?" the boy asked. "Because if a rescue record reaches Earth with names on it, nobody gets to pretend you were cargo." Tavin closed his fingers around the recorder. "I can do that." The first child stepped into the cargo bay. Tavin spoke. Carefully. "Lyra Vaughn. 6 cold cycles. Alive." Mason did not correct the unfamiliar measure of age. He only watched the child move toward the heat. Another child entered. "Nomipel. Alive." Then another. "Caruves. Alive." As the names filled the recorder, something changed in the cargo bay. The Veyra did not become less afraid, but they stood a little straighter. They were not being counted as units. They were being named as survivors. Mason understood, then, that the recorder was more than a record. It was a weapon Helix had not expected. A warm blanket could save a body. A spoken name could save a person from being erased. That was when Director Callum Voss arrived on the channel. His face appeared on a side screen in Mason's cockpit feed, which Sela had patched into the control room. He was human in shape, but not human, with smooth, pale skin and eyes like polished stone. His voice was mild, educated, and empty of hurry. "Pilot read, I am Director Callum Voss of Helix Trade Combine. You are attached to a controlled asset site without authorization. You will disconnect at once." Mason kept his hands on the heat controls. "There are civilians here. There are residual labor elements inside a decommissioned operation. Their status is under review." Mason looked toward the cargo bay, where Tavin was reading another name. "One of your residual labor elements is 4 years old." Voss did not blink. Local reproduction within company habitat does not alter contract status. You are committing unlawful removal of bound personnel and interference with protected property. Sela went very still beside Mason. Mason's voice stayed level. "If they are property, why did you block their distress call?" For the first time, Voss paused. "You are repeating contaminated information from a damaged site. Leave now, and Helix will consider this a navigational error. Remain, and Earth authorities will receive a formal claim against you." "Send it," Mason said. He cut the feed. 3 seconds later, Dock 4 screamed. The inner frame began to close. Sela lunged for the manual override, but the panel was dead. Helix had remote access. Mason ran for the docking control, slammed his palm over the ship link, and fired the North Star Mercy's side thrusters at low burn. The ship shoved back against the closing frame. Metal bent. The corridor shook. Somewhere in the tunnel, children cried out. "Keep them moving," Mason said. "The seal will break," Sela warned. "Not if my ship breaks first." He fed more thrust. The warning lights on his wrist display went red. The right stabilizer took damage. A vibration passed through the deck, deep and ugly. But the frame stopped. The line of Veyra moved again. Mara Quell was the last of that group. She walked slowly, refusing to be carried. When she reached Mason, she pressed something into his gloved hand. It was a small metal nameplate, burned black at one edge. "My mate's name was Oren Quell," she said. After the blast, Helix changed him to unit loss. I kept this because I was afraid that one day I would forget the shape of his name. Mason closed his fingers around the plate. You will not have to carry it alone now, he said. Mara looked at him for a long moment, then stepped into the warm cargo bay. By the end of the first hour, Mason had moved 63 people into the Northstar Mercy and warmed enough of Core 3 to slow the dying. It was not victory. It was time. In a place like Kestrel Ring, time was the only currency that mattered. He sent a compressed packet to Earth Civil Relief Office through a narrow beam. It contained images of the children, thermal readings, the blocked distress signal, and the first list of names. The reply took longer than he wanted. When it came, the face on the screen belonged to Nora Hale, an Earth Relief coordinator with tired eyes and a steady voice. Mason Reed, this is Nora Hale. We receive your packet. Confirm. Are you inside Kestrel Ring? Docked and feeding heat, Mason said. I have children aboard and more people trapped in outer modules. Helix is actively interfering. Nora glanced down, reading fast. Kestrel Ring is listed as closed commercial property. Helix filed a dispute the moment your signal hit relay. They can file it on warm paper. I need ships. I am working on it. Work faster. Nora did not take offense. How many survivors? Mason looked at Sela. Enough that no one gets to call this empty, Sela said. Mason repeated it. Enough that no one gets to call this empty. Nora's expression changed. She understood more than the words. Send everything you have, she said. Not only heat readings. Send names. Send proof of civilian presence. If I'm going to break a trade lock, I need more than a pilot's word. Mason looked toward Mara's burn nameplate. You will get names. Sela hesitated. There is more than names. Mason turned. She looked toward a sealed corridor marked with hand-painted symbols. The lights beyond it were dead. There is a ledger, she said. Not a book. Data. Helix does not know we saved it. It proves why they left us. Why did they? Sela's face closed around an old pain. Because we survived the first thing they did. The corridor to the data vault was colder than the rest of Core 3. Mason felt the chill through his suit before they reached the first sealed door. Sela carried a battery lamp. Its weak light slid over frost, cracked wall plates, and old scorch marks that no one had cleaned because no one had enough heat to waste on grief. This was the main thermal spine, she said. My parents worked here. So did Mara's son. So did most of the first shift. Mason kept his pace slow enough for her to lead. The blast happened here. Helix called it an environmental failure, Sela said. They said our bodies could not adapt to industrial temperature shifts. They said the colony had become biologically unstable. Her voice was flat, which told Mason more than tears would have. Was that true? Sela stopped at a manual door and entered a code by touch. No. Inside the vault, the air was so cold that Mason's breath fogged inside his mass display. A small data core sat inside a thermal case wrapped in layers of salvaged insulation. It looked painfully ordinary for something people were dying to protect. Sela knelt beside it. Her hands shook, not from fear now, but from cold. The mine was almost empty, she said. Helix wanted the last extraction before closing. She opened the first file with stiff fingers. The system was already beyond safe range. My mother warned them 3 times. Other engineers warned them too. Mason crouched beside her. What did Helix do? They ordered override. The data unfolded across his wrist display in fragments. Heat warnings ignored. Engineer objections dismissed. A remote order approving overdraw. Then came the blast record. It was not weather. It was not weakness. It was not the Veyra failing to adapt. Helix had forced the system past its own safety limit, then sealed workers and families inside the damage. For a few seconds, Mason said nothing. The cold around them felt different now. It was no longer only the cold of a broken colony. It was the cold of a decision written in clean words by people far away. Sela opened more files. Death records appeared first. Then the language changed. Civilian settlement became operational remnant. Residents became labor residue. Emergency support became cost exposure. Mason felt the old anger rise in him. the kind that had kept him flying in storms while officials argued over who owned a road. They did not abandon you after the accident, he said. They used the accident. Sela nodded once. If we die, the report is simple. Harsh environment. Failed adaptation. Decommissioned site. Lost to natural conditions. And if you live, then we are witnesses. She opened another file. A list of other sites appeared, each one marked by Helix language that sounded clean until you knew what it meant. Local failure. Labor. Transition. Communications drift. Asset loss. These are other colonies, Silas said. Small ones. Far out. Different species. Same words before they disappeared. Mason stared at the names. Kestrel Ring was not a mistake hidden at the edge of one system. It was a method. The story had just grown teeth. Sela, this has to reach Earth. If it reaches Earth, Helix will stop pretending this is a safety matter. They already stopped pretending. The station trembled. A low boom rolled through the corridor. Mason's wrist display flashed. Outer Home 7 had lost heat completely. Home 9 was losing pressure. Sela closed the data case and stood too fast. She swayed. Mason caught her elbow. For a second, she leaned into the support because her body had no choice. Then she pulled herself upright. Do not carry me, she said. Carry the data. I can do both if you stop arguing. Her mouth tightened. It might have been the ghost of a smile in some warmer life. They returned to Core 3 with the data case between them. Mason sent the first proof packet to Nora Hale. He did not include everything. The beam was narrow, the interference heavy, and Helix was watching. But he sent enough. The ignored warnings. The override. The reclassification order. The list of dead. Nora called back minutes later. Her face had gone pale. Mason, Helix has filed an emergency petition with the Galactic Council. They claim Earth is stealing protected commercial data and removing bound labor from a quarantined asset. There is no quarantine. I know, but Counselor Iron Dath has issued a pause order while status is reviewed. It says all movement from Kestrel Ring must stop until ownership and hazard claims are verified. Mason looked through the nearest window. Beyond the glass, the outer homes were dim beads in the black, connected by thin corridors of aging metal. People were out there, waiting for heat, waiting for him. If we pause, they die. Nora's voice was quiet. I know that too. Then why are we still talking? Because if I send ships now, Earth may lose the Damaris lanes. Helix is threatening trade sanctions. Council members are calling this a precedent breach. She looked away from the screen for a moment, then looked back. They are saying any company zone could be entered under the excuse of distress. Mason watched Taven guide 2 children toward a warmer wall. The boy still held the recorder. It is not an excuse if people are freezing. I'm not arguing with you, Nora said. I'm telling you the price is climbing. Good. Then everyone can see what a life costs here. Nora closed her eyes for one brief second. When she opened them, she looked less like an official and more like someone standing at a door in bad weather. Keep them alive, she said. I'm going to wake every civil captain in range. The council order arrived on every open channel 10 minutes later. It was written in calm language. It requested restraint. It called for verification. It warned against escalation. It said nothing about children in Core 3 or elders wrapped in torn insulation. It did not mention the dead whose names have been changed. For the council, delay was procedure. For Kestrel Ring, delay was heat dropping 1 more degree and then another until bodies stopped fighting. Sela listened to the message once. They sound clean, she said. That is how Helix sounded when they sealed my parents in the spine. Mason checked the heat map. We are not stopping. Your Earth may not stand behind you. Maybe not yet. And you still continue? Mason looked at her. Sela, I did not come here because a council approved it. I came because your brother got a signal through. Her eyes shifted toward Taven. The boy was reading another name into the recorder. Maraquid, builder of Core 3. Alive. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. Not builder. Old builder. Say it right. Taven smiled for the first time Mason had seen. Maraquid, old builder of Core 3. Alive. The smile did not last. The colony shook again. This time the lights in the outer corridor flickered red. Sela ran to the control board. They are cutting the outer homes. Mason leaned over the display. 3 habitat clusters had begun to separate from the main spine. Slow at first. Controlled. Official. A procedure with a clean name and a murderous purpose. What happens if they detach? He asked. Sela's voice was almost a whisper. The families inside will lose heat and drift. We cannot reach them after that. How many? She swallowed. 48. Maybe more. 17 children. Mason did not answer at once. The North Star Mercy had 1 deep reserve left. It was not meant for heating colonies. It was meant to get the ship out when every other system failed. If he burned it through the docking clamps and corridor heaters, he could keep the spine open long enough to move the outer homes inward. He would also lose his way out. Sela saw the calculation on his face. No, she said. Your ship will die here. Maybe. You have already done more than anyone. Do not become another name we have to carry. Mason looked through the corridor window. Far out in the dark, one of the outer homes rotated a fraction away from the spine. Its windows showed tiny movements inside. Hands. Faces. People trying to understand why the last door was closing. He had seen that look before. On Earth, behind frozen school windows after a storm wall broke. In a flooded clinic when the backup power failed. In the eyes of people who had realized that help was close enough to imagine and still might not reach them. Sela, he said, how long if I burn the reserve? 7 minutes. Maybe 9. Can your people open the inner manual locks in 7 minutes? If the old gears move, will they move? For the first time, Sela did not answer like an engineer. She answered like someone whose people were behind the door. We will make them move. Mason opened the ship link. North Star Mercy. Route deep reserve to external heat and clamp hold. Confirm manual override. The ship warned him that this would compromise departure capacity. Confirmed, Mason said. It warned him again. I heard you the first time. Confirmed. The deck lurched as the reserve came online. Heat surged through the broken frame of Dock 4. The metal around it glowed faintly under the frost. The North Star Mercy groaned like an old animal putting its shoulder under a falling roof. Sela turned to the Veyra around her. Outer homes to Core 3, she called. No box. No tools unless they carry life support. Children between adults. Elders in center line. Move now. They moved. Not perfectly. Not bravely in any clean storybook way. People stumbled. Children cried. Someone screamed when a pressure seam split and cold vapor sprayed across the corridor. But they moved together. Adults locked arms to form guide rails. Older children pulled smaller ones forward. Mara stood at the entrance to the warm corridor and counted people through with a voice that did not shake. Mason ran the line between ship and colony, fixing what broke faster than it could kill them. A clamp overheated, and he vented it. A pressure curtain tore, and he sealed it with emergency foam. A child froze in the middle of the corridor, unable to step over a gap where the floor had buckled. Mason crossed, lifted her, and placed her into Sela's arms without breaking stride. Tavin kept the recorder open. Jessapel, alive. Runevel, alive. Samiquid, alive. His voice cracked, but he kept reading. Then the transmitter slipped from his numb fingers and skidded toward a service grate. Tavin went after it. Tavin, Sela shouted. A support strut snapped overhead. The corridor buckled. Tavin dropped to one knee, reaching for the recorder as the outer home shifted again. The gap between corridor plates widened under him. Mason was already moving. He crossed the buckling floor, caught Tavin by the back of his coat, and hauled him up. The boy clutched the recorder to his chest. The path behind them twisted. The manual valve that would seal the last pressure section was jammed half open. Sela reached it first. She put both hands on the valve and pulled. It did not move. Leave it, Mason said. Come on. If it stays open, the corridor vents before the last group crosses. Mason took one step toward her, but another child fell near the gap. He turned, lifted the child, and pushed him toward Mara. Sela braced one foot against the wall and pulled the valve again. Frost cracked around the wheel. Her pale blue veins flared under her skin with the strain. Sela, Tavin cried. The valve moved. Not much. Then enough. The pressure curtain snapped into place behind the last family. Sela staggered back as the corridor beyond the seal filled with white vapor and vanished. Mason caught her before she fell. For a second, neither of them spoke. Around them, the rescued families pressed into Core 3, shaking, sobbing, and alive. The North Star Mercy gave a low warning tone through Mason's wrist link. The deep reserve was depleted. Departure capacity was uncertain. Mason looked at the message and closed it. Was it enough? He asked. Sela looked at the people around her. Tavin was alive. Mara was alive. The children from the outer homes were alive. Yes, she said. It was enough. In the darkness beyond Kestrel Ring, the first new light appeared. At first Mason thought it was ice glare. Then the light moved against the field. Another appeared behind it. Then 3 more. His comm panel opened on an Earth civil band, rough with interference and overlapping voices. North Star Mercy, this is Cargo Hauler Bright Road, Earth Registry. We heard you need heat and lift. Another voice followed. Medical transport Willow Bank approaching from High Plane. We can take injured. A third voice cut in, older and calm. Supply ship Far Harbor has shelter frames and warm tanks. Marcus Elaine, Mason. Mason let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Nora Hale appeared on the channel, her face lit by too many screens. Mason, Earth Civil Relief, is opening a voluntary humanitarian corridor. Council has not approved it. Helix is furious. I need you to tell me if there are living civilians on that site. Mason looked at Tavin. The boy lifted the recorder. Names filled the channel. Child after child. Elder after elder. Engineer after engineer. The living first. Then Mara began to read the dead. Nora listened. So did the incoming ships. So did, Mason hoped, anyone Helix had failed to silence. The Galactic Council warning followed almost at once. Counselor Irondith spoke with formal restraint, but strain had entered her voice. Earth vessels entering Kestrel Ring are advised that this action may constitute unauthorized intervention in a commercial dispute. All parties are instructed to avoid further escalation. Nora answered before Mason could. Counselor Daff, Earth vessels are responding to named civilian survivors in immediate danger. If the Council wishes to call that a commercial dispute, the record will show it. It was not a speech. It was not a victory. It was a line placed in the cold. Sela looked at Mason. Are they all human? Mason watched the approaching ships, their lights small but steady. Yes. Tavin, still shaking, whispered, they look like doors. Sela put a hand on her brother's shoulder. Then keep them open, she said. The rescue took the rest of the long, dark cycle. The bright road locked on first. It was a cargo hauler with a cracked paint line and a captain named Henry Vale. He did not ask Mason for permission to be heroic. He only asked where to place his heat tanks. Mason gave him a lane. Through the ice. The old hauler turned sideways, shielding the wounded corridor from drifting debris while people crossed beneath it. The Willow Bank came in next with medical frames and a crew that had clearly expected a station accident, not a colony frozen by paperwork. Its medics went quiet when they saw the Veyra children. Then they worked faster. They wrapped silver blankets around narrow shoulders, warmed fluids by hand, and asked Sela which bodies could tolerate heat quickly and which would die if warmed too fast. The Far Harbor arrived behind them with shelter frames and warm tanks stacked in its bay. Its crew built a heated passage out of cargo walls and spare seals. A broken docking lane became a place where elders could breathe. Sela answered every question. She was exhausted enough to fall, but every time someone tried to guide her to a bed, she pointed to another valve, another child, or another elder who needed a slower lift. Mason moved between ships, not because he was the highest-ranking person there, but because he knew the broken colony now. He knew which corridor could take weight, which seal had to be touched gently, and which section would scream before it failed. When Helix Control Pulse tried to close an inner hatch on the Far Harbor's rescue crew, Mason cut the hatch power with a hand tool and told the crew to keep walking. His voice stayed level. That steadiness did more than comfort people. It gave him rhythm. At one point, Director Voss forced his face onto every local screen. He said the rescue vessels were spreading panic. He said Earth pilots were damaging private infrastructure. He said Helix would hold each captain personally responsible. Captain Vale of the Bright Road answered on an open channel while unloading heat tanks. His voice sounded older than the ship. Director, I have a child in my cargo bay whose hands are frozen around a toy made from pipe wire. Send your invoice to me. Other Earth captains began marking their cargo transfers as humanitarian aid. The words spread across the rescue network faster than Helix could erase them. Humanitarian aid. Civilian survivor. Named evacuee. Each phrase was ordinary. Each one cut through the company's clean lie. There was no clean triumph in it. The injured did not stand and cheer. The children did not forget fear because warmth arrived. Some people from the outer homes were carried out too late to wake. Some names Mara read had no body to follow them. The North Star Mercy lost main drive twice, and Mason had to guide 2 incoming ships by hand through a lane of tumbling ice while his own navigation system flickered in and out. But the corridor held. Earth ships locked themselves around Kestrel Ring like hands around a cup in winter. They brought heat tanks, pressure tents, spare seals, stretchers, food paste, water, and enough blankets. They did not ask who had a work contract. They did not ask which family had paid passage. They asked who was breathing and who needed to move first. Helix tried to interrupt through every official channel. Director Voss changed his reason each time one reason failed. First, he claimed contamination risk, then asset theft, then data breach, then unauthorized relocation. Each claim sounded clean. Each one sounded smaller as the images spread. A Veyra child asleep under an earth blanket. A burned nameplate in Mara's hand. Sela's data showing the ignored warnings. Mason Reed standing at a broken docking frame. One arm braced against the wall while survivors passed behind him. By the time the last living group left Core 3, the phrase labor residue had begun moving across public networks with a rage Helix had not expected. It was one thing to hide cruelty in a file. It was another to make ordinary people hear what that file meant. The temporary Earth relief station near Damaris was not beautiful. It was made of joined cargo bays, inflatable walls, spare heat rigs, and floor panels that did not quite match. But it was warm. It smelled of broth, clean fabric, antiseptic, and tired bodies. To the Veyra, it seemed almost impossible. The first thing Earth staff did was set up a registration table. Not an intake cage, not a property review point, a table with a heater under it, a translator, and a woman from Earth who asked each person for their name. Sela stood beside Mara as the old builder approached. The Earth clerk smiled gently. Name. Mara lifted her chin. Maraquid, old builder of Core 3. The clerk typed carefully. Maraquid, civilian survivor of Kestrel Ring. Mara stared at the screen. The words stayed there. No code replaced them. No company status corrected them. No one changed survivor into asset. Mara reached out and touched the glass with 2 long fingers. Again, she said. Please say it again. The clerk did. Maraquid, civilian survivor of Kestrel Ring. Behind her, Tavin began reading names from the recorder so none would be lost in the rush. He read the living first, then the dead. When his voice failed, Sela took over. When Sela's voice broke, Nora Hale stood beside her and kept the channel open. Mason watched from the edge of the repair bay. He had refused a medical bed until the North Star Mercy was stabilized. The old transport sat behind him with half its hull scorched, one stabilizer torn, and the docking clamps fused from the heat burn. It would fly again someday, maybe. It would never again be cheap. Nora found him there with a cup of coffee he had not asked for. You look terrible, she said. You opened the corridor, Mason said. You opened it first. He took the coffee. His hands hurt now that he had stopped using them. What happens to Helix? Nora looked through the repair bay glass at the registration line. They have lost control of Kestrel Ring. Their local assets are frozen. The data is public enough that the Council cannot bury it quietly. She took a breath. Other systems are asking about missing colonies. That is not an answer. It is the beginning of one. Mason did not like beginnings that arrived after people died. But he had lived long enough to know that some doors opened only after someone pushed until their shoulder bled. On a nearby screen, Counselor Irondath gave a brief public statement. She did not apologize. She did not admit the council had been wrong. She said the council would review emergency definitions regarding civilian distress signals inside commercial zones. It was cold language, but it was movement. Nora lowered her voice. Earth is issuing a civil relief principle. Any civilian distress signal received by an Earth vessel can be answered. No company can use ownership to erase that signal before life is protected. Mason looked at her. That will cost us. Yes. Trade lanes. Some. Council pressure. A lot. More signals. Nora's face changed. She turned the screen toward him. Across a dark map of the outer territories, faint points had begun to blink. Weak signals. Old signals. Some current. So maybe too late. Mining sites, labor habitats, closed research camps, forgotten stations at the edges of profitable space. For a moment, Mason could not speak. The galaxy had not been silent. It had been muted. Sela joined them, moving slowly but refusing the cane a medic had offered. Tavin walked beside her with the recorder hugged to his chest. Those are other colonies? She asked. Nora nodded. Some may be false. Some may be old echoes. Some may be people. We will check. Sela looked at Mason. Then Kestrel Ring was not the end. No, Mason said. It was the first door we got open. Tavin studied him with the serious eyes of a child who had been forced to survive adult cruelty. Is Earth really warm? He asked. Mason looked past him through the relief station glass. Beyond it, the Damaris belt turned in distant darkness. Kestrel Ring was out there, cold and damaged, no longer hidden but not yet healed. Inside the station, Veyra families sat under blankets, holding cups in both hands. Earth medics moved between them. A clerk read names slowly so the translator would not miss a sound. Mason crouched, though his knees protested. Earth has cold places, he said. It has storms. It has mistakes. It has people who look away when they should not. Tavin's face fell a little. Mason continued. But it also has people who hear a knock in the cold and open the door. That is the part one trust. Tavin thought about that, then nodded as if Mason had given him a real answer instead of a pretty one. Sela looked toward the registration wall. Names continued to appear there, one by one. Living names in one column. Remembered names in another. Orumquid, Lyra Vaughn, Nomipel, Jessapel, Sela Vorn, Tavin Vorn, Maraquid. We will testify, Sela said, not only for us, for the others on that map. Mason stood slowly. You do not have to do it today. No, she said. Today we get warm. Tomorrow we begin. That sounded right to him. A relief worker called Tavin's name for a meal pack. The boy started to go, then stopped and turned back. Mason read, yes. Tavin held up the recorder. I kept the first signal, the one they tried to bury. Mason nodded. Good. Keep it safe. No, Tavin said. I want Earth to keep it too. If more people are calling, they should know someone answered. Mason looked at Sela. She nodded once. So Mason took the recorder and handed it to Nora Hale. Nora connected it to the relief station archive. The first sound that played was almost lost under static. A young voice. Finn. Afraid. Still brave enough to speak into a dead channel. There are children here. The relief station went quiet. No one ordered silence. It simply happened. Earth workers, Veyra survivors, pilots, medics, and clerks all heard what Helix had tried to make unheard. Then the archive marked the signal as received. Not resolved. Not closed. Received. Outside. More Earth ships moved into the dark lanes beyond Damaris. Not warships. Not conquerors. Cargo haulers with patched hulls. Medical transports with crowded bays. Civilian pilots who had heard what was happening and turned their ships toward places the maps called empty. Mason watched them go. He knew some would arrive too late. He knew some doors would open on his silence. He knew Helix was only one name for a kind of cruelty that wore many uniforms and spoke many polished languages. He knew Earth could not fix the galaxy in one flight, with one broken transport. But Kestrel Ring had been called empty, and now its people were warm behind glass. It had been called property, and now its names were public. It had been marked for erasure, and now its first buried signal was teaching other abandoned places how to be heard. Mason set one hand on the scarred hull of the North Star Mercy. The metal was still warm from the heat it had given away. On the other side of the glass, Tavin was eating with both hands around a bowl. Mara Quell sat near him, correcting the spelling of old names for the Earth clerk. Sela stood beside the registration wall, tired and unsteady, but upright. She was no longer only keeping a dying colony alive. She was carrying its truth into the open. Mason thought of the silence he had heard at the edge of Damaris. It had not been empty after all. It had been waiting for someone stubborn enough to listen. In the end, Mason Reed did not save the Veyra because it was easy. He saved them because someone had to answer when the rest of the galaxy chose silence. And maybe that is what makes humanity different. Not perfection, not power, not the need to be praised, but the simple courage to open a door when someone is freezing on the other side. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who loves meaningful science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about humanity, courage, and the lives the galaxy tried to forget. Your support helps this channel grow and helps me keep bringing you emotional, imaginative, and human-centered science fiction stories. Thank you for listening. Wherever you are, I hope you remember this. Sometimes one person opening one door is enough to change what an entire galaxy believes is possible.